All right, greetings, everybody.
The hours.
Want to welcome everyone to today's Millis Finance Committee meeting. Today is March 6th at 7 p.m. And why don't we go around? My name is John Lohr. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee. And why don't we start off to my left and introduce ourselves?
Sarah Reyes.
Peter Underhill.
Joyce Boyardi.
Mike Crone.
Kathy McGinnis.
Peter Perubi.
And Deirdre, Jen is playing piano for the Millis Cultural Club organization, but Jody is visiting us via Zoom.
Yeah, hi Jody.
Hi, thanks.
Thank you. And just to remind our viewers that not only can you watch this live, but you can also watch this on demand. I kind of want to make this into like a Netflix series, like season 1, episode 4. Could be, yeah, exactly. So anyway, without any further ado, we got to talk about schools tonight, the school committee, what we have so far and the numbers that we have so far. And then we just have a few minor housekeeping items after that on the agenda. Does anyone have any questions before we get going? No? All right, sounds good. Come on up.
All right, long time no see.
I know, right? Tri-board just
Last
recently.
week, Mark Conroy, I'm the chair of the school committee, and Superintendent Bob Mulaney has joined us tonight as well. First, I will start, because normally we don't come here till after our public hearing. So I'll start by letting you guys know and everybody watching know our public hearing. So our detailed budget presentation will be next Tuesday night at our meeting at 7:30. And everyone is welcome to attend and
That's
ask
over at the,
questions.
it's at the
Yeah,
library.
over at the high school library.
Yep.
So, all right, so what I did kind of as a high level was just, I sent over today, we got the high level numbers, which I put them in the same format as when I came in January to show, in January, I had basically done a very high level estimate. And then now based on what we have in our actual budget, and then based on the revenue numbers that we got from the tri-board last week, you see over in the March 6th column. So revenues, 20,095,000. Salaries are a little bit higher than what the estimate over the 4%. But the reason that that's over for the contracts themselves, total 4%, but we had a few positions this year that we have had to hire in order to accommodate IEP, individual education plans.
Yeah.
One being, actually, I have them written down back here. We had to hire an RBT, which is what's the?
Registered behavior technician.
That's it. That we've had to hire recently, that the full year of that person has to be in our budget. We're funding it this year, actually, due to a vacancy we have in our TIERS program, which is the program for those students, individuals who are between the ages of 18 and 22. We have a program it's housed over in Norfolk, kind of life skills program.
So between the ages of 18 and 22?
Yeah,
And are these the ties? No.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
the ties.
ties,
Okay.
yep.
Is everyone
So,
familiar with that?
no,
If you could just take a moment and.
go ahead.
So TIES is a 18 to 22-year-old program. Certain students on individual education programs with special needs, we're responsible for their education until they're 22. So TIES stands for Transitioning to Independence, Excellence, and Success. And so it's it's vocational skills and life skills class, and transitioning to jobs. We have a couple of our TIES students one works with the fire department, one works with the police department, so they get jobs in the community. And so that's, they have an academic teacher, a transition, who's also a transition coordinator, and then we have job coaches who go with them to the job site or help them apply for jobs, depending on the level of need. So we had a job coach position in ties that has gone unfilled this year. We haven't been able to fill that position. And so to pay for the RBT, we used those funds this year. But for next year, we'll need the job coach and the RBT.
And remember, I'm the new guy here, so this is required by state law.
Right, we're
Correct.
responsible for their education. until
Correct.
22, and then the state takes over.
Okay, gotcha. And according to your handout, there's 6 of them?
Six
6?
currently, right. We just had a student graduate last month. She turned 22.
Okay,
And so we have 6 currently in that program.
okay. And then just while we're on it, it says out-of-district placements, 18, is that ties as well?
No, that does not include ties. Ties is.
Okay, that's separate.
Considered an in-district.
Yep, understood, okay. Thank you.
And can I ask, does the state give us any compensation for this program?
Other than the usual, grants we get through the federal government, through IDEA and things like that. No, it's not part of circuit breaker or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
So the RBT we had, so that's built into the budget. Due to students and new requirements, kind of learning plan changes, we have some summer sessions that we have to do for this summer. So that's in the FY25 budget. And then we also had another paraprofessional role that we had to increase to from 20% time to full-time in order to accommodate IEP needs for students. So those increases totaled roughly $140,000 in next year's budget. So that's the difference between salaries being at 4% and being at the 5% number.
And just to clarify, to follow the bouncy ball, so the .93, those add up to the .93 difference of 4 versus the 4.5, that's to the far left.
So the 4.5 was just a conservative estimate.
Okay, thank
And
you.
then what our contracts would have come in at, if not for these additional hires we had to do this year, would have come in at right at 4%.
Gotcha, thank you.
And then, so our out-of-district tuition, actually from a comparative, is basically, it's a 3% increase, but what's in there is we did get, and we're planning for fiscal '25, we're getting an additional $200,000 in circuit breaker, which is offsetting the increase that we would have, that we have. So if not for the increase from circuit breaker funding, that number would be $200,000 higher.
This is the 2,080,000 you're talking about?
No, the 1,855,000.
1,855.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Thank you.
And these are SPED students?
Yeah. So, and if you remember, the out-of-district tuitions, how last year they all went up 14%.
Yeah.
And we were, the state authorized 4.6% this year, which is still higher than the 2% that it was, prior to last year, historically.
18% over 2 years. I'll take that raise all day long.
Right.
So what, sorry, I'm just asking as we go
Yeah.
along here. So how come we went from 14 down to 4? Why did the state go down 14 to 4%? Do we know?
No idea, other than the fact that the private schools didn't ask for or didn't
Okay,
get. So the 14% was based on the private schools using their COVID money.
Correct, right.
To increase salaries and increase staff.
Yep.
For retention.
I remember that conversation.
When that money ran out on them, they went to the state and said, in essence, allow us to increase tuitions in order to cover what we did with the COVID money, and the state said, okay.
Yep,
The operational services department sets those rates, and we really have no recourse. It's a small agency, and they set the rates, and
Yeah,
we're bound to.
and that's 4.6 for every district that's in Massachusetts,
Correct.
yeah.
For private out of
Yeah.
out of district.
So then our other, kind of, all other non-salary, regular expenses is going up by 3%, so 2,080,000 with, so total budget ask of 21,165,790, which calculates to a shortfall of 1,070,000.
Yep.
So the impact, as I kind of outlined last week at the tri-board, the impact of reductions if an override doesn't pass is going to be, and let me just find the numbers that I have, because I had them written down. And they actually, when I went through it, realized that the total that we had worked off of last year that had these totals was the 986. So we're actually, so yeah, so it was 7 teachers and 8 aides. The reason that there was no support staff in those tier 2 and tier 3 cuts were because we had them in tier 1, and we're at the point where we can't reduce, we
Understood.
can't take custodians out. We only have one principal for each
Right.
school. So, there really isn't any room in that. So again, it was 15 positions, and again, when I looked at it today, adjusting for FY '25 salaries, that's about just over $1 million, $1,007,000. So we probably have another 60 to 70,000 that we're gonna have to come up with, which we'll do over the next couple of weeks.
On top of the 1,070,000?
On top of like when we did our tier 2 and tier 3 cuts last year,
Oh,
which was
yeah.
at 15 people.
Yeah.
If you take those totals.
Yeah.
Probably only totals about 1,007,000.
Yeah,
So I get another 63,000 to get to the 1,007,000.
gotcha. Go ahead, Joyce.
Everybody talks about full-time equivalent and full-time employees, so, right, equivalent or employees. Are these full-time, 7 teachers full-time and 8 aides full-time?
Yeah, they would all be full-time positions. Actual people, not fractions of people.
So it's a
Actual.
full.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm playing catch-up here still. So these 15, though, this was what happened last year?
No.
Oh, they
That's
did.
what,
Skip. That's what's
these
scheduled for this
15
year.
is what the free cash and the stabilization saved last year.
Correct, okay, that's fine. Yep, I'm with you.
And it was 7 that we actually lost.
Right.
Last year.
Correct.
For this
And-
year, for this year.
Fiscal
This-
year
this-
24.
Right.
Right. And those are not in the override number. Those are not coming back.
It was 7.5 last year. FTEs.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're
Gone.
full-time, half-time, it doesn't matter. They're FTEs. That's why you have equivalents. And you can cut somebody's hours, but when you aggregate them, you end up with 7.5 FTEs.
Right.
To me, it does not matter if it's my personal opinion, it doesn't matter if it's an FTE or a full-time person that cuts down to, part-time, even though their benefits would stay at a certain threshold, you're still reducing some portion of the labor cost. And it's not 1-for-1, it's never 1-for-1 in terms of dollars, because there's other costs out there.
You're looking at a dollar figure, not a person.
You're just trying to get to a dollar figure or something, it could be,
Yep.
I don't argue with that. It's just the fact that if it is a full-time position versus, say, 2 part-time position, 2 people that are losing part, it's perception of what the people out there. If it was a half,
But but what's lost in that is there are some people who only work half-time. So if you cut a position that is only 20, that is 20 hours a week, that person 100% of that person is gone.
Right.
It's a 20-hour-week position, but again, it's also 20 hours of services and 20 hours of education not being provided. Regardless of
Regardless.
whether it's a fraction,
Mr. Chair, the reason that I think it's important not to distinguish whether it's a full-time person or a part-time person is because I think it's the school's responsibility, and I think they're best suited to decide whether they cut, say it's 15 people. They can cut 30 people half-time, and it's up to them to balance what that mix of resources is so they still maintain the programs. They can
Agreed.
get there any way they want, in my opinion, as long as they
Get
get
there.
to $1 million.
Agreed.
They can cut 45 people down to half-time or a third of a time.
Yep.
That's why you use FTEs. And nobody here can do it, has the resources or the expertise than the school committee. And I think we ought to keep pressing them on that particular issue as, as we intend to do, and as they're more than capable of answering the questions. I just think, in my personal opinion, whether it's FTE or, whether it's a full-time person or a part-time person, doesn't matter, as long as we get to $1 million and they maintain the best level of service that they can doing it.
Go ahead.
So last year, one of my last comments, when everything was pretty much a fait accompli in terms of the budgets before we got to town meeting, was, has the school, or should the school, really, you've built a system up over the last 120, 130 years. And at this point, yourselves, like most other schools in this region, you run into these same issues. You build layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And the question is it wise at this point, and should it be wise at this point, to really go back to zero and say, okay, this is the school system, this is the money we have, this is the school system we want to build with that money. And it requires an analysis of really every job, everything, every expense, everything you do in the school system, perhaps getting an outside analyst to come in, provide expertise and help in making certain determinations and things like that, because this isn't going to be the last deficit. It's going to continue, even if we have the override. The override will solve the problem of this year, but what's next year and the year after and the year after? I know the override continues, I know that money continues, but at some point, you're going to exceed that too.
so we haven't asked for an override in
I know that.
13 years.
No, I know that.
So-
But there have been
so-
deficits each year.
Well, correct, and we've managed through, and most of them are beyond control. I beg to differ that we have layers and layers. I think that's a,
Well, every school has layers. I mean, you have,
Layers of what?
well, you started out with elementary school, then you have all of the other, you have teachers, and then you went to assistants. I mean, looking at a school system from 50 years ago and a school system today, they're different school systems. And that's natural. You build things on top of other things because that's the way the system is. Some of it's mandated. SPED is mandated. It isn't anything like it was many, many years ago.
Right.
All of those are added layers. And it's not a criticism that there are layers. The question is, can you look back and say, okay, well, some businesses, we've done this, where you say, okay, this is our process, or this is our money. Can we build a school system with this money? And what would that look like? It may be untenable. It might not be possible. But is it a process that anybody's thought about looking at least?
so I don't think the district or the town is in the position to be able to go hire some consulting firm to come in and spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do some evaluation of the staffing model of the school district.
Right.
I just,
Well, I mean, if you could save hundreds of thousands of dollars, then it's worth it. But again, I can't tell you it would or wouldn't.
well, I also don't think that it would save hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, our class sizes are comparably not overly small. We have literally like one teacher per grade, per classroom. We have, one biology teacher, one chemistry teacher. We have one administrator. We have a half of a assistant principal at Clyde Brown. We don't have layers of administration. We don't have layers of custodial staff. If if we were a significantly larger district with multiple layers of administration and multiple schools with empty or very low class sizes where you could say, should you be consolidating buildings, maybe shut a building down so that you could save on the fixed costs of having turned the lights on? Maybe, but that's not what we have.
And I would say, you know, business manager myself, have gone through the budget line by line, looking at prior years, the actuals, and, you know, the projections for next year, so it's, you know, it's something that we look at very closely.
And I continue on with something
Yeah,
else.
go ahead, one
We'll
more.
leave that piece. School choice. So the students that we take in under school choice. So what do we have, and this was a question I asked last year, but there was a lot of uncertainty about it for a couple of reasons. One was if we took a student in, and that student was in first grade, and then by third grade, they were recognized to be a special education student. Do we have to maintain that student under our SPED program, or do they go back to the town where they came from and go into their SPED program?
No, they stay with us, and the sending district would be responsible for any additional costs. So that wouldn't fall on the taxpayer millers. If we have a student at Holliston, say, and they're, you know, put on an IEP and have services, then we're responsible for that in Millis. So, and once a choice student is in your district, they're your student.
So for the remainder of their public
As long as they
education,
choose to be, they can always choose to go back to their
but if they
home
don't,
district.
they stay with us?
Right, they are our students.
And do we think that, I guess you feel that, at least looking at the numbers you've presented before, that it's a plus for us financially?
Absolutely.
They haven't increased our class sizes in any way, or
No,
creating the need for
Well,
extra
they've
staff?
increased class sizes, but only to the extent that there was an empty seat that was there, they're occupying that empty seat.
Okay.
So when we get, you know, on the average about $5,000 for that seat,
So
that
no-
otherwise would have been empty.
So no new seats are created?
No.
No.
And that 5,000 was last year's number. Will that change at all? Or is it
It's around that,
minimal?
it's,
Yeah, like, but they have, in the estimates, we're looking at Millis generating $200,000 more in choice revenue than we are sending out for fiscal '25. And that's been as high as 300 in prior years.
Thank you.
Just on the school
Go ahead.
choice.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's my understanding, because I had children that did choice, and that if like, my daughter went into another school system in fourth grade. My son could not go because there was not, he was in sixth grade. He could not go because there was no space for him in sixth grade. He was able to go in seventh grade because there was room for him. So they don't make room for you, even if you've got one family member going.
Correct.
It has to be an open spot, and it stays that way till they graduate, or as you say, come back to Millis if they choose to.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Pete.
When we're talking out of district and in district, I see the numbers per student for Norfolk Agricultural. Do you have how much we're paying per student per year for Tri-County?
I don't have that number.
No, we can get it.
It went down, you said last meeting, though, I think.
Yeah, I think it was like 12 or 13, but it might be higher.
Just curious, we have all the other numbers,
Yeah.
just looking if we can get that, thank you.
This is sad.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Pete.
Could, I'd like to request that, if it's not, I mean, maybe we'll see it when we get after your budget hearing, and I know I think I've seen it before in your previous budget books, but the enrollment by grade over time.
Yeah.
You know, so we can see
Yep.
the curve of growth or decline in student population, and,
Yep.
you know, attempt to correlate that
Yeah,
to
we
costs.
can, we have that, because we have, in our enrollment, we actually review enrollment monthly, and it shows the last, 7, 8 years.
I'm not expecting any epiphany that, you know, we go down 10 students and that means we take away a teacher, you know, it's easy. None of this is easy.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, no, losing, like, yeah, it just doesn't work.
I understand, but I would like to see it.
Yeah.
So,
And I would imagine the presentation that you had last year would be similar to this year with updated numbers. So we'll see those trends, whether it's enrollment, school choice, tri-county, Aggie, et cetera. Let me take a 90-degree pivot here. So what happens if override does not pass?
Then 15 people are out of the district.
Oh, okay, I'm with you, yeah.
Yeah, that's an
Yeah,
estimate,
that's the max, sorry.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay,
Mr. Chair.
go ahead.
I know in past years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you had some, and my terminology will be wrong, but some multi-year classrooms. Ms. Hernandez taught a class of 4th and 5th graders. I don't know if you call that blended or what you call it. Do you still have those initiatives going on? And if your student population were to facilitate that, would that help you, expanding that program, would that help you reduce staff or minimize cuts if you had to reduce staff?
We don't have any of those classes right now. I suppose if the numbers were drastically different, it could, but it's very challenging to do that, particularly since we've been implementing some new curriculum. And it's very prescribed by grade level.
Mhm.
So to have a 4th and a 5th grade in the same classroom, they need different English literacy curriculum, different math curriculum. So the numbers haven't supported doing that in the last, few years.
Okay. I know there was COVID in between and that, shut a lot of that stuff down, obviously, but just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, and if we lost people and got into a scenario or looked to just reduce staff in order to create, larger class sizes, you just put more kids in, we'd run into issues of maximum class sizes that are allowed in space alone in the classrooms, let alone contractual obligations.
And if you notice in the enrollments, our youngest classes are our biggest, the big wave coming through.
I know we're going to get a lot more information during your school committee meeting, and I know we're going to get a lot more information next time we meet on April 3rd, 4th, I believe. But do you have a question?
do.
Yeah, go ahead, Cap.
I'm wondering if the school and the town have revisited shared services. I've been hearing for years about fields being combined. There's been the talk last year or two about combining human resources and perhaps the payroll and businesses. The necessity for having systems that the town uses that perhaps the school does not have the proper training to use. And I was trying to look through your documents from last year about the number of staff in those type of positions in the business end of it. And where does anyone stand on, rather than cutting services, combining it with the town? And also something that, okay, let's just go with that first. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So I know this year, and Bob can talk to any discussions that are ongoing, but I know like building maintenance is the one that we tackled this year in terms of coordinating between the town and the school departments to get, facilitating buildings. We've looked at various times. Fields is a whole thing unto itself. Definitely would be open to doing the same thing as they're doing with the buildings, I think. What also I think came out, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there are any employee efficient we are not duplicative in the number of people that we have between the town and the school that allowed for us to reduce staff. It, I think, allowed for better efficient use of the teams that we had to get the stuff done, but it wasn't, it's not a scenario of, oh, well, we've got people doing nothing, so we could let go of one if we just merged. And I think that would be the same with Fields as well. HR's been a void of a function, I think, town-wide, from municipal side and the school side, not in terms of formality. So if that's being, built up and we can leverage that, that'd be great.
We have been working with the town on the onboarding process and things like that that have made it a little more efficient. But again, nothing to the extent of, well, if the town's handling the onboarding, then we don't need this person. It's more like taking something off someone's plate that was overloaded.
So that's definitely not a consideration to think of just cutting FTEs rather than looking into combining services with the town side?
I think it's more that the services that, combining the services isn't going to create the need for less people. I think that the people that exist both on the town side and the school side, I don't think there's any department in Millis that has excess people to do the work that needs to get done.
That's, Mr. Chair, that's your opinion, not of anybody that's come and done an analysis of same.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Correct.
Thank
When
you.
we did the grounds and maintenance, no one lost a position.
Right.
We didn't reduce anyone when that was combined.
On that same breath, the resource officer that's at the school, currently that's funded through the police department, right? And we all know the HCA funds will be ending eventually in the next 2 years. Is there any thought or discussion with the police department of sharing that resource or how, or let me rephrase that. Talking to the police department, it makes sense to have a resource officer at school, especially with current events in the news, makes sense to have it. And some districts may have more than one. I guess the question is has there been any thought yet to allocate funds or start working with the police department to try to maintain that position?
There's been discussions
Okay.
about it, down the road because, the HCA agreement will take care of it as far as I know for next year, for FY '25. But there has been talk about how do we keep this, because I agree, it's a vital role in the schools now. You talked about how schools are different 50 years ago.
Sure.
Officer Forsyth, who's our school SRO, does a phenomenal job connecting with kids, being able to alert town social worker when something's, it really helps us in our dealings with our kids' parents, and vice versa, the police and the schools have an outstanding relationship, I'd say.
And Mr.
Perfect.
Chair, in that vein with the social worker, there's been conversation about the use of that person within the school, within the district. Would the school be considering to absorbing a portion of that salary if it's that needed when the HCA funds run dry?
I hadn't.
He doesn't know yet. Yeah.
It's got to be on the, not something that
Those
you
are
think about the
questions.
day the money's gone, and to weigh the options.
Because
Any of the-
we have social workers in school, our adjustment counselors.
Sure, yeah.
I think the key thing is, our adjustment counselors work, until 3 o'clock, 3:30. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens after 3:30 that
I don't doubt
social
it.
workers aren't available
Yeah.
for.
Thank you.
It's just a question that we've been asking departments as they've come along that have been receiving HCA funds, just to start thinking about it. Not that we all have answers right now, but something to start thinking about. I'm good. Does anyone else have any final questions?
I just want, I'm reading this, but I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm reading it correctly.
Okay.
The asterisk on the eliminated one section of pre-K for 23 to 24, elimination of one pre-K teacher position. This was last year, or, yeah, that was last year.
Yeah.
So you did have 77 previously enrollments? Okay,
Right.
okay. I just want to make sure I was reading that correctly. So this year, you've got you've got enough for 53 students? This
Right.
this year?
This current year.
coming year?
Set this year.
And that's an example of where, mandated costs can come in. Preschool, if we had a cohort of students in town who were identified by early intervention of needing services, and the cohort was large enough, we would be required to open up another section of preschool.
And how would that get paid?
We'd have to figure it out.
Preschool is optional in general,
Right,
but if someone's identified in early intervention, then the public school is required to provide the services starting in preschool.
right. Is pre-K, is this something that the parents pay to have their children go to, or is this offered by the town, or
It's
both?
It's a tuition program,
Must have spent-
but if you qualify for services.
No, I understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, it's a tuition,
So then
it's,
there's
yeah,
Students' tuition.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So it's self-funded?
there's some portions that is in the operating budget, but and we can get the exact breakout. But there's a piece, but tuition subsidizes it, just like in kindergarten, tuition subsidizes it. It's kind of split between the operating budget and tuition.
Okay, thank you. It's been a long time
And
since
just-
I did littles.
And just to go off the Tri-County enrollment down, it looks like last year we were at 37, and now we're at 32 for this year?
Correct.
Okay. Any rhyme or reason, or is that just ebb and flow of?
The last year's senior class of Tri-County from Millis was good size.
Okay.
So we graduated more Millis students from Tri-County than entered as freshmen.
Yes, go ahead, Sarah.
You wanna go? I know that we talked a little bit about this, at the tri-board meeting, but I think it is helpful too, when we get to that point, when it's the 15 positions, just talking about what we're losing, what we're
Yep.
potentially losing as far as AP classes or a chemistry class, or are we gonna have 30 kids in class instead of 18?
Right.
Thank you.
That to me is more impactful than dollar amount.
Yep.
Or physical person.
Yeah.
Because even if it was 10 people that we're losing, if my kid can't take an AP program or take TV or something like that, then we're losing out. The
Yeah,
community as a
and-
whole is losing out.
And that's exactly what, if not for the stabilization and free cash last year,
Correct.
there would have been AP courses not have offered.
Or even like the music program, I heard
Yeah.
some of them.
Yep.
So in your meeting, will you have kind of the impact, to Sarah's point, with those 15s? If we were to paint a picture here and say, these 15 people are leaving, whoever they are, would there be an impact? Could you illustrate the impact of those
I think in
positions,
gen-
whether
I
it's
think
at
in
your
gen-
meeting or whether it's at April 3rd when we next meet?
Definitely April 3rd.
Okay,
Be extremely specific on April 3rd.
yep,
Because then we're hitting that April communication component.
yep,
I think next week we can be generally, it's going to impact, it could cause class sizes at Clyde Brown to go from 20 to 30, whatever
Sure,
those
sure.
things are.
I think that's what earlier, what
Yep.
I was referencing to, as far as full-time people versus a part-time equal, to make two. Because then, if you're losing a first-grade teacher or a AP teacher, so I should have been more specific as to what, but thank you, Sarah.
Pete, you have a question?
Could you clarify or just expand the definition of choice? Is that somebody that choices into another school district, or is it private school, or?
No, it's
Good, that's a good
Got to
question.
talk into the microphone.
Oh, yeah,
We've
make
got
sure
a
you're
boy
talking to the
and
mic.
choice, when it's school
Thanks,
choice, and we're talking about the ins and outs on school choice, that is between public schools. So Millis student goes to Holliston, Holliston student comes to Millis, Medway, whichever one. There's no revenue change associated. Student from Millis goes to Zavarian, Millis doesn't lose dollars because the kid goes to Zavarian. Doesn't lose dollars if they go to Nobles. Loses dollars if they go to a different public school. And same thing. We get, well, kid comes here, we get the money.
I could probably do the math, but in terms of the dollar amounts here, you have 333,000 of money coming in from school choice, and approximately how many kids is that? Do you know? Is that divided by 5?
I think I had
68.
60, okay,
Sounds good.
all right, perfect.
Is the amount of money that goes out
Just under 5.
greater than, less than the money that comes in? Or is it
The money's the
amount?
same. The money's the same per kid.
Right.
It's a numbers, it's a matter of whether you have more kids coming in or
Okay.
going out.
So we have 68 coming in this year, we have 22 Millis kids going out.
Gotcha.
That's on the third page.
Yep.
Can I ask so let's say we get into a situation, we don't get the money that we need to fund the school. Can we refuse a school choice student trying to come in?
The only way we could refuse is if the school committee votes not to accept choice students.
Which some towns do.
Right.
But that would be new kids only.
That would be, right, any
Right.
choice kid we have now
Well, you keep-
would be grandfathered in.
Right. But if our class sizes started to go up and
Right.
there weren't open
And we
seats.
can, right, and in the case, we have one class that has 102 students in it. That class would be closed to choice, like Joyce said.
Okay.
And we do that when our vote, if we're looking at the enrollments and we say, we're in school choice, but 5th grade is closed.
Right.
And that's,
And that's an annual
Yeah. We have to
choice
vote it every year.
school committee can make every year?
yep.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
I think for some people, it's not as important as what's going to be cut. I think for a lot of voters and taxpayers, it's how much money they have that they can spread around for all the wants that are needed in this town now. So I wonder if someone, I'm going to vote for the override because this class is going to be cut or something, or is it they're going to support the override, but their money is thin on supporting something else. So I think you must be aware that don't pick and choose what would be favorite and what the vote would cast. It would be like what you've come to the table with and cut already before you're asking for money. Has there been any sort of, services, someone retired, you didn't fill them or something like that? Is there any way that you can show that you've decreased something?
So I think I think the way we're looking at it is the override this year is to provide level service from what we have today.
Okay.
We cut last year 340,000, 7 FTEs that reduced services. And we knew it at the time, and even at that time, I and the committee agreed that we weren't going to ever entertain putting those positions back into the override to restore 2 years ago. So, but my position is we did reductions last year that had an impact. And if we are going for an override this year, we should go for an override that does level service. And you're absolutely correct. Every voter in this town And it is, in my opinion, one of the best things about Prop 2.5 is Prop 2.5 overrides provide everybody with an option. You have a choice. And it is, comes down ultimately for everybody of, has the case been made that what's being asked for is needed? And then at the end of the day, can you personally afford it? And if you can't, then vote no. And if you can, and the case has been made that it is a needed service and that it's not from the cause of, waste and abuse and all the other stuff, that's on us to make the case, and that's what we do with part of the campaign and what we do for the next 2 months, is make the case for how we got here and why people should support it as long as they can afford it.
And just to remind everybody that this is a town override, not a school override. So there's municipal departments that need additional resources, and the school needs additional resources. So it's the best decision for the town as a taxpayer, whether you want to or not, to be in favor of the override.
And Mr. Chair, following up on that, I'm just wondering if the school would ever, would think about your services that you need as opposed to the town services that they say they need. Would you be willing to, go out on your own for an override for what, I know that's not a discussion, but
yeah.
it's got to be out there, Mr. Chair.
I would agree. It's a valid point. However, I don't know if that's a school decision. I think that's a select board decision. So. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. We greatly
No problem.
appreciate it. I
Thank
know
you.
we'll have more questions as we go forward.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a
Thanks
good
all.
night.
See ya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, good to see both of you.
All right. So, moving along to the draft of the warrant articles. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions on the current draft of this? It looks like we're up to 21. Some of these are placeholders, as our town administrator has said.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Seeing with the Oak Grove improvements with CPC there, and I'm looking at our schedule, I don't see CPC presenting to FinCom.
That's a good point.
I'd have some questions specifically for that, but we usually have CPC present.
I will work with Deirdre to get that on the schedule.
Thank you.
As well as an MBTA for Jody.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Pete.
who is proposing, and I guess I just answered my own question, it's the select board, but I'd be curious to learn a little bit more about the special act and authorizing the town administrator to sign warrants and the motivation to do that.
I can't get them up.
I think our town administrator can shed some light on that right now.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If I may, Mr. Chair. So for those board members, the Finance Committee members that weren't on the committee a few years ago, there was an article for a special act. This was after a town charter study committee was put together, made a number of recommendations. A few of the recommendations, I believe, were accepted, but many were not. This is one of the recommendations of the committee that was not accepted by the town at the time. And just to talk a little bit about this, under state law, the select board by default is the body that approves payroll and expense warrants for the town, which means on a regular basis, they're required to come in, review the warrants, and to sign the warrants. This can be a cumbersome process, and I believe the select board, as one of their goals, are looking at having a special act to authorize the town administrator to approve those warrants. The only way to really, there's only two ways to enact that. One is through a formal charter change, the other would be through a special act. So the board has discussed that. I imagine they will discuss that some more over the next month. And I certainly recommend, if the Finance Committee has detailed questions, to, ask a member of the board to come in as well, or to bring it up at some joint meeting to discuss it. So, Finance Director is here as well. She knows the process quite well, as well as I do, so she could certainly answer any questions about the actual process of the warrants.
If I may, is it limited to payroll and expense warrants, or are there others?
It's pretty much the payroll and expense warrants. So it wouldn't be, for wouldn't change the thresholds for approval of contracts and things like that. It's just the regular weekly, bi-weekly payroll and expense warrants.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Library parking lot contamination environmental study. I'm not familiar. Do we have a contamination issue there?
So that goes back a long ways. That predates, that,
You'll open the can of worms. Get ready.
I didn't write the
this is
warrant.
not, yeah, this is not
A lot of bodies in there.
This is the part of the meeting where we all.
It was a gas station.
Enlighten us.
I will give you
the
what
brief
I can
history.
inform you of at this point. This predates me. This goes back at the time that the library was built. There was some remediation done on the site. And I think at the time it was believed that most of the contaminants had been addressed. But one of the abutters to the site needed to do testing for a project they were doing, and they came up with contaminants. They since reached out to the town, looking for a partner in addressing the issue. So we've hired a consultant and an LSP to come in and assist us in doing that research. And unfortunately, the initial testing shows that there are contaminants beyond the threshold of DEP reporting. So therefore, we're going to have to do some testing. We'll have to drill some additional wells and do some testing over a period of a year or several years, and determine whether or not any additional remediation needs to be done to the site. I've been through these things before, over the past 30 years in different towns, different locations. It is a process you have to go through. The DEP mandates it, and this would allow us to meet the legal responsibility of the town as a property owner. And since the town purchased that property, the town also takes possession of any liability from, not just from when they purchased it, but from any prior owners. And the belief is that there was a fuel tank there at one time, and that leaked. And there's still an amount of contaminants in the soil there that meet that threshold. I mean, to be sure, it presents no threat to the public. These are all things you go down, you drill down through the parking lot, you go down into the groundwater, and there are some contaminants there. But again, it does not affect our water supply. Or drinking water is not impacted by this at all. This is simply a site issue that we're gonna have to deal with.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Who's the neighbor?
I'd have to go back and look at that again. We've basically, I have not met face-to-face with a neighbor. This has been through, up
Is
to
it
this
on the
point.
Exchange side, on the
Yes.
Exchange Street?
Yes.
Okay, so it's one of those homes?
Right, it's one of those properties right
Right
at
there.
the corner, near the corner.
It's not further down at all, because they're further down, was there not contaminants from?
Yeah, this is a property that immediately abuts the library parking lot.
Okay, and you're
So-
sure, and they're sure it's not coming from?
Well, that's
the
part
con-
of
because just further down on Exchange Street, there were contaminants behind Victory Lane, so,
Well, we've hired people that know far more about the flow of water underground than I do, and they'll be doing those tests and looking at the results, and that will tell them which way the water is flowing, thereby which way the contaminants, which direction they're coming from.
so if they find out that it isn't coming from the library area, and it's coming from another area, then the town isn't responsible?
Well, it might change the level of liability and responsibility among the parties. But
Okay.
we're all, in a way, we're all kind of in this together with the town and the abutters. We have to work together to determine the cause and the liability. But that's part, really, this, what we'll be looking for, and we're still drilling down to the exact number we'll be seeking, is really to set up an account so that, you know, as we get bills every several months for testing and, you know, maybe having to drill another well, we have funds available to pay for that.
One more question.
Go ahead.
And is this part of the contaminants that were at the police station? Because
I
there were
don't-
contaminants there as well.
I'm not sure if it is. I cannot say definitively, but based on what we've seen, I haven't seen any evidence of that. But again, until we do some testing, a little more testing, we don't know for sure. I think this is mostly that immediate area behind the
Okay.
library and those abutting properties.
Great, thank you. Sorry.
And regarding those tests, are those online, once you get them, and how frequently are those tests?
Usually those tests are done quarterly.
Okay.
And I can check to find out the status of those.
I didn't know if they're published on the Millis site or if they're published on the Mass DEP.
That's a good question. And I will speak with our LSP. I think we
'Cause this
just
could-
got some tests recently. So I don't think they've been posted on any site as of yet.
Okay, because we don't know if it's a finite or infinite of testing.
We don't know how long, the term of the testing will depend upon test results.
Correct.
So if the levels continue to drop and drop rapidly, then there'll be a point at which we can basically file with the DEP and request that we can do a closeout report and
Yep.
not have to test anymore.
Makes
That is
sense.
several years down the road. But in the meantime, we need to follow the DEP regulations.
Understood. While we're on the draft here, do we know when, you said next meeting, when do we get an updated draft?
You will have a draft, an actual draft warrant. It won't be 100% complete, but it'll be much more informative than this.
Okay.
You should receive that. I should have that available to distribute to the committee next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Pete.
To you, if you could certainly defer on this. On the rescind debt authorization for Village and Birch drainage improvements, does that involve actual dollars borrowed, or is it just a project that was never executed and we're taking the borrow authorization away?
Yes, the latter. It's actually, we never borrowed the funds,
Sorry.
but our auditor wants to get that off our books.
Okay.
So,
That should be a very complicated one and require at least a half hour at town meeting.
Yes.
I hope not.
You never know.
No, unpaid bills
Okay.
would do that.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I think I had asked for information regarding the indirect costs for the enterprise funds. A couple of weeks
but-
ago, you,
That was for the DPW though, right?
I don't know who, in the finances you had in your FY '25 budget, Mr. Chair, showed the indirect costs projected for the enterprise funds, and I had requested a copy of that breakdown.
Will Jim provide that at the DPW presentation?
I just thought it
I
was an
certainly-
executive, I thought it was a finance that that figures this out.
Carol Johnston, Finance Director. The indirect costs are supposed to be being calculated by the DPW. That was part of Carl Valente coming in and doing the indirect costs analysis that we had. My belief was it was supposed to be taken over by the, actually Deirdre's position as part of her promotion. It has not been done, as far as I know. What we had agreed to is we would continue to just increase the enterprise indirect cost by 2.5% over the previous year until they get that up and going. So it's the same projection that we had before, where I can show you the lines that we have, but we've only increased it 2.5% over the prior year.
I'm still just wondering how the executive department comes up with your figures on what percentages that you take from as a result of your indirect costs, not the DPW indirect costs, but the
Well,
staff.
the calculation that was derived at by Carl Valente, the outside consultant, went through a whole series of things. So it's a whole calculation spreadsheet with all the backup. That you can ask Jim McKay or Deirdre, and they can show you the analysis that's supposed to be done. In the meantime, because we don't have that, we're using our old information. All we're doing is taking it and updating it based on the way the old calculation was, but only taking last year's number and increasing that by 2.5%. So you'll see there's a difference of like $100,000 between what it should be based on the old calculation and the 2.5% year-over-year increase.
Is there sort of a breakdown about what the original costs were that you are increasing by 2.5% each year?
I can send you the spreadsheet.
Thank
I
you.
sent it to Jim McKay the other day, so.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, so
I'd
he,
appreciate
he
it,
has
Mr.
that,
Chair.
but
Yeah,
I
you can
can
get that.
send it to I can send it to John,
Yeah.
and he can distribute it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay?
That'd be great. Thank you, Kara.
You're welcome.
Thank you both. Moving
Nice to
along
see you.
on the agenda here. Let's see here. Let me put my- Yeah. So we have some minutes here. That's not on the agenda, but I think we need to approve them.
Yep.
I'm just going to insert here. These are the FinCom minutes from February 28th, last week.
Mr. Chair?
Hang on a sec, sorry. This was Deirdre. You there? If you could just update the time at the top of the minutes, was at 5:30 instead of 7.
Oh, okay.
No
All right,
worries,
yeah, sure.
I just caught that quickly. Sorry, Pete, go ahead.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I move that the committee approve the meeting from, minutes from the meeting of February 28th as amended.
Second.
It's been motion and seconded to approve the FinCom meeting minutes from February 28th at 5:30. Is all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, say no, or not in favor?
Opposed?
Couple things here. I'm kind of going to weave liaison old business all together. So, I don't know if everyone, old business, if everyone had a chance to watch the school project Zoom meeting. It was very informative. It's on demand, so feel free. It's good. I wrote down a lot of stuff. There's a lot of questions. Joyce and I were going back and forth with some questions in terms of state aid. How's that, how do we get that? Whether that's just repair work or remodel or a new building. And there's a whole slew of different formulas and caps that go with that. That's on one of the slides in the middle. So I've reached out to them. I have not heard back yet, but,
Thank you.
you know, I think what's important as we go forward here on several things, one, this override, two, school project, three, Tri-County, four, PFAS. There was a fifth one, I forget what it is. But anyway, if we can start kind of, trying to put together some documents, so as we ask questions along the way, we can kind of put a FAQ together for ourselves, just to remind ourselves, because we're the folks that are gonna need to be talking to the residents, and we wanna make sure that we're educated as much as we can. So, I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention voting on Super Tuesday the other day. I don't know if anyone saw the Vector truck, but remember the Vector truck was approved last year? There was the backup and the Vector.
votes?
It might have. So, but I just wanted to point that out, that was in full use. Going to liaisons and committees, I don't have any capital planning committees. We're gonna meet tomorrow on that. But a couple points here. One is, I was gonna revisit what FinCom members are on various committees. Joyce, you're on Council on Aging. I'm on CPC. Kathy, you're on CPC 2.0?
No, we're the 1.0.
1.0, okay. We're 2.0. So is anyone else on a committee that I'm overlooking? So I think what would be good is I'll get that list, and maybe if you could kind of give it some thought, I'll distribute it via email, and maybe just kind of give some thought, if you want to be on a committee, if you're not on a committee, if you want to change committees, or if you don't want to be on a committee. So any of the above, but I think it would be good for all of us just to participate on those committees, and sometimes we kind of have to.
Mr.
versus
Chair.
Want to. Go ahead, Pete.
There is a spreadsheet that I can send you, and I think I received it from Deirdre or from the town clerk's office, which has all of the committees listed.
I got it.
Who are the voting members, who are the ad hoc members.
Okay.
What are the, what are their level of authority or responsibility? So if you don't have it, I would
Absolutely,
look
no, I
for that.
appreciate that, okay. I think I have it, mine might be outdated. The other liaison thought I had was, Mike and I talked about this about a month ago, is, does it make sense for FinCom members to be a liaison to departments and be the point of contact for departments? So someone be the point of contact for school or for DPW or whatever it is, police, fire. One, is that an idea that has traction, or do people not want that type of a thing? And speak freely.
My 2 cents are that we, as a committee, the most important thing is that we have representation and awareness that comes back to the committee.
Sure.
But I would say that we should not have a standing member necessarily for all of them. For instance, the school.
Yep.
Because potentially you input bias into that input. I don't know where everybody stands, and I don't really
It's a good point.
care where everybody stands until we have a discussion here and a vote. But if it's the same person all the time, for instance, if you assign somebody to the school building committee.
Yep.
Then somebody, not that anybody would do it maliciously, but you want to hear different opinions or perspective on facts that were given at the meeting.
Valid point.
Just my 2 cents.
Yep, no, I appreciate that, thank
It'd be a
you.
rotating kind of thing if you needed to do it. I think that they report to us enough, or if there's questions that
Okay.
need to be made, or, then we go through you.
That's fine.
Well, I think one of the reasons we discussed it was that for a lot of departments, we see them once a year, maybe twice. I agree with you. I think my recollection of, and the other finance commission I was involved with, we did have standing members involved with various committees, such as school committee and so forth. And yes, there could be a bias, almost always in favor of whatever the committee wanted. But I think the reason I had suggested or talked to John about it was that we just don't get enough background talking to them once a year. I think DPW, police and fire at a minimum, I think would be helpful to see where they're going, what their issues are, what problems they exist, just to give us some background. It doesn't necessarily have to be all year long. It could be starting in December, ending in May, just to give some better background. But again, there was a thought.
So, just to write on that, so maybe inviting them in during the fall time as a kind of an update?
Could do that. I mean, just
Just
to
talking
kinda-
out loud.
Yeah, I mean, what are you anticipating? What questions? I know with the DPW, we could talk to them every month.
Yeah,
And we'd have
exactly.
more information for
Yeah.
all the different things they're doing, and so that might be helpful. It makes us a more informed committee, but I certainly understand the con to that particular
Yeah.
position.
Just don't want to feel like we're micromanaging them, and,
Agreed.
I think that they're doing a good job. I mean, I would much rather them come here and talk to us than having one of us be the liaison
Yeah.
to go and ask them questions, because financially, yes, maybe we can ask, but I just think coming here, if we're
Yeah.
gonna do it, would be a better
Yeah.
if, and
Mr.
that's a big if.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I would almost think that you would, whether it be here or amongst a smaller group, go through each department or other town committee and go through them case by case and come up with a recommendation. There really is no police and fire committee other than maybe emergency management, but you're not really talking the same issues that we talk in here. And if you had regular check-ins, that would be fine. And for chiefs of fire and likely for Chief Barrett as well, they're always willing to come in. I mean, Chief Sapphire has invited us over with
Yes,
less than a quorum to
correct.
go over there and see things that we don't see or that aren't for public consumption, I would say. So, just 2 cents on that. On the school building committee, I'm not sure that I know we're not appointed, we don't have a rep appointed to that committee deliberately.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
because of that, unless we have a rep that goes, that is assigned in either informal fashion, somebody volunteers, hey, I'm going to the meeting this week or whatever. Less that, I would say that you ought to consider putting them on the agenda every time that there's a milestone on their published calendar. They have a calendar.
It's a great point.
It's a very
And,
good,
and
very
you
valid.
put them on the calendar so that we do know and we stay up, because there will be a lot of milestones in the next year to 2 years.
Correct.
That if we do that, there's no way that we'll have kind of a similar situation to Tri-County where maybe we feel like we weren't in tune as much as we should have been.
We weren't.
It's a great point, and a good lesson to learn and not repeat it, and
I think that was
Open
part of the impetus
communication.
to this, is that, you know, keeping up with things as opposed to being hit with them at the last minute, come February or March, you know? Having an understanding of where things have come from, and it might give us a better understanding, too, of how they arrived at their decisions, as opposed to 20 minutes trying to explain it to us. But it's something to think about.
yeah. I think that's a great, that makes sense. I think also just, you know, what I'm trying to do is just keep pushing Zoom meetings, material, et cetera, to the committee, so you guys are fully informed. Pete, you have a question?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
It's been a motion to adjourn. It's been properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.